Everybody, bonsoir. It is Tuesday, July 12th, 2022 at 6 p.m. So I will call this public hearing regarding applicant Dr. Louise Riveros, Professional Corp. to order. I will ask the city clerk to record the attendance, and I welcome those present to the public hearing. Welcome. The purpose of the public hearing, I'll review that. The purpose of the proposed amendments are to A, amend the Schedule A future land use map of the City of Miramichi Municipal Development Plan, bylaw number 109, to permit a change in land use designation from residential to commercial regarding the subject property, and to amend Schedule A zoning map of the City of Miramichi zoning bylaw number 110, to change the zoning designation from single or two-unit dwelling R2 to general commercial GC for the subject property described as PID 402-66231, located on King George Highway. There is currently no civic address assigned to allow the development of potential commercial uses such as stores, car dealerships, or offices. The public hearing respecting these proposed bylaws is required under Section 113 of the Community Planning Act. The purpose of the public hearings is for City Council to consider objections to the proposed bylaws and to hear persons who wish to speak for or against written objections. So with that, I'll introduce the I won't introduce them, but the next step of the process is an introduction of proposed amendments, and I'll call upon Nick Odette, Planning Services Manager with the Greater Miramichi Regional Service Commission, to introduce the proposed amendments. Mr. Odette, welcome, and I will turn things over to you.
All right, thank you, Mayor Nordin. So this is the public hearing presentation for proposed bylaw number 110-16. So again, the proposed amendments are to the city's municipal plan and zoning bylaw. To the bylaw, the requested change is to change the zoning from single or two-unit dwelling to general commercial, and under the municipal plan to change the designation from residential to commercial.
It's on? Sorry.
There was previously a public presentation in June that was regarding the municipal plan amendment portion of the request. And the applicant has indicated and requested that a limited number of proposed uses from the general commercial zone be permitted by the requested amendments. So the zoning bylaw does not permit these commercial and higher density residential uses under the current R2 zoning. There's a location overview of the property situated in the Nordin neighborhood area of the city along King George Highway. The total property, it's about 13.6 acres. Again, access would be from King George Highway. Currently, there are two zones in effect. The second zone is the watercourse and wetland overlay zone, which would not be affected by this request. And the land use designation is residential. Currently, the property is vacant, and the applicant has requested that a number of commercial and residential uses be permitted. More specifically, these uses identified by the applicant include a clinic, pharmacy, apartment dwelling, row house dwelling, restaurant, retail store, automotive dealership, early learning and child care center, fitness center, post office, financial institution, or a school or training center. Each of these uses are permitted currently in the general commercial zone. And I'll note, just for clarity, that any potential development that we would see in the future, if this was approved, would still be subject to the general commercial zone regulations, along with any other applicable zoning provision from the bylaw. I'll just take you through a few photos quickly. These were taken at the end of the spring in April. The first photo is looking straight into the property from King George Highway. You can see there's a large cleared portion here. This is looking west towards Newcastle, the various auto dealerships there across the causeway. This is looking slightly more south. looking at properties across the street, so there are some residential uses quite close by. And this is looking north from Hester Street, which is a side street to the south of the subject property off of King George Highway. Getting into the planning considerations now. So this is the Schedule A future land use map of the municipal plan, showing that the property is designated as residential, the yellow color. There are some, the pink color is commercial, so there are some commercial designated properties in the area, but not adjacent to this property. The property is also designated by the plan as a mixed residential area. That's under Schedule B, which is the residential hierarchy. Under Schedule C, which is the commercial hierarchy and designations of the plan, the property does not currently have a designation because it's residential. As well, King George Highway is designated as a major arterial road by Schedule D of the plan, the road hierarchy. The most general policies and proposals in the plan related to economic development and commercial development are supportive of the proposed potential uses. However, potential development on the property cannot be considered infill or reuse of existing buildings as the property is vacant and the immediate area is low density in character. Additionally, this is not an area that receives full city services. There's only municipal sewer in this area, no water. Looking at the zoning bylaw now, you can see the mix of zones on this property. The water course and wetland alteration zone is the sort of the squiggly line. We estimate that approximately 4 acres of property are unaffected by the water course zoning at the south of the property, so that would likely be in the future what the applicant would be restricted to use, but not necessarily. Here's a reference list of the requested uses by the applicant compared to the rest of the uses in the general commercial zone. So as you can see, overall there are quite a few uses permitted in the general commercial zone, and the applicant did a good job of picking and choosing select uses that they would like to see permitted. Again, none of these are permitted under the current R2 zoning of the property, but are permitted in the general commercial zone. So again, because there's no direct proposed use, we can't really do a zoning analysis of a site plan or development plans at this point. But we can say that the zoning regulations and the specific provisions under the general commercial zone would apply to future development and could provide some certainty with regards to land use impact of any development there. So this includes things like front yard setback, back side yard setbacks, maximum lot coverage, maximum height, as well as a number of other factors like parking requirements, the location of parking spaces, size, driveway parking lot design, signage regulations, as well as lighting and some landscape regulations, amongst others. Staff do note that after the plan amendment and rezoning, there is no mechanism to add additional terms and conditions not regulated by the zoning bylaw. So council, as always, can utilize Section 59 of the Community Planning Act to place additional terms and conditions on any potential use or development here. More specifically, because this is a unique application, I'll just note that if permitted uses of the property are limited through conditions, which is what staff's recommendation is, no deviation in these uses would be permitted without a future rezoning application. So if this was approved with the list of uses as recommended by staff and the PRAC, in the future, if the applicant wanted to see one of the other general commercial zone uses permitted, they would have to come back to council, apply for a rezoning. Some more notes here. So the zoning bylaw restricts residential development in areas like this where there is where it's not fully serviced. So any residential development here would be restricted to 4 units in any case. As always, staff would require a detailed site plan and other construction plans as part of a larger building permit application if and when a specific project is proposed, if this is approved. Any proposed development would be reviewed against applicable zoning regulations and any conditions imposed by council. And just to note that any development taking place within 30 meters of the watercourse running through the property, roughly the area designated with the WW zoning, a permit could be required from the province under the Watercourse and Wetland Alteration Regulation under the Clean Water Act. Looking at the potential neighborhood impacts and compatibility, there are some businesses in the wider area, again, not immediately adjacent to this property, but these include Peak Performance, Trevor's Hyundai, Mitsubishi, Nissan, all separate properties, as well as Ray's Trailer and the Esso Pit Stop Pub. The immediate area around the property, it's mostly low-density residential, potentially even rural might be a term that some would use. The proposal could present a land use intensity that would surpass existing conditions and activity in the area. It could be considered comparable, depending on the development, to other commercial uses in the wider area, however. Now that we're at the public hearing stage, there are specific neighborhood impacts and concerns identified through the feedback received. We reached out to the city's Engineering and Public Works Department just for preliminary comment. No comments were received, but typically we would only ask for comments in the case of a proposed development. So if this is approved by council, we would then be asking for comment from multiple departments when a building permit application is received. So I'll read the views of the PRAC, their recommendation. So this was resolution 2022-2-2 of the GMRSC Planning Review and Adjustment Committee, passed at the regular meeting April 19th, 2022. They recommended to approve the plan amendment and rezoning application subject to conditions. So pursuant to section 110.1 of the Community Planning Act, it is the view of the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee of the GMRSC that the City of Miramichi amend Schedule A, future land use map of the City of Miramichi Municipal Plan, Bylaw 109, to change the designation from residential to commercial. And 2, Schedule A, zoning map of the City of Miramichi zoning bylaw, Bylaw 110, to change the zoning designation from single or 2-unit dwelling R2 to general commercial. For the subject property described as PID 40266231, located on King George Highway, City of Miramichi, no civic address. This is to enable limited future development, and that such approval be conditional upon and subject to the following terms and conditions pursuant to Section 59 of the Community Planning Act. That condition reads that the main uses permitted on the subject property be limited to clinic, pharmacy, apartment dwelling containing not more than 4 dwelling units, row house dwelling containing not more than 4 dwelling units, restaurant, retail store, automotive dealership, early learning and childcare center, fitness center, post office, school or other training facility, and financial institution. The PRAC also wanted to add that these views were provided without receiving comment on the proposed plan amendment and rezoning application from the City of Miramichi Engineering and Public Works Department, as well as it was provided without receiving comments from the public. Thank you. Back to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Odette. The next portion of the hearing is written objections received. So there were 2 letters of written objection received. I will now ask the city clerk to please read the letters, as they will now form part of the record and considerations of council.
The first letter is from John Martin, rezoning of PID 402-66231 King George Highway. With this letter, I wish to express my objection to the rezoning of the aforementioned property, PID 402-66231 King George Highway. A simple visual inspection of this property should be sufficient to determine that this property is and should remain classified as residential. The entire stretch of King George Highway between the Hyundai dealership and the Town Ford dealership is occupied by private residences with no commercial businesses on this stretch of the highway. a car dealership, restaurant, retail store, or any other business mentioned in the notice of application clearly is not a fit for this area. Having said this, there are clear reasons why this parcel of land should remain designated for residential development only. Over the years, development in the city of Miramichi has accelerated in the Douglastown area. This has put pressure on King George Highway to be able to efficiently and safely handle the increased traffic. The area in question is particularly bad as it is located on a curve in the highway, making safe entry onto the highway difficult, especially given the speed limit on this stretch of highway and the failure of many motorists to even adhere to this posted speed limit. Although it is before my time living in that area, I understand there has already been one fatality in the corner of Hester Drive and the King George Highway. Development of the type mentioned in this application would, and the resultant increase in traffic would make an already difficult situation more difficult and dangerous. Also, residents have selected this part of Miramichi as an attractive location to live because of the lack of commercial activities in the immediate area. The land values reflect this. Any commercial development of the type mentioned in this application could only negatively impact the property values in the Pill Hill area and the adjacent stretch of the King George Highway. Over the last few years, I have approached the federal, provincial, and municipal politicians regarding the need to address the traffic and safety concerns associated with the King George Highway, including the posted speed limit and the excess speeding on the Nordin stretch of the King George Highway. The city has developed without due concern being given to traffic flow on this highway. There is a clear and obvious need for a northern bypass highway to divert traffic around the city to the ongoing development in the Douglastown area. This issue would only become critical when the announced maintenance is undertaken on the Centennial Bridge. Until recently, my concerns were not taken seriously by almost everyone I contacted. Thankfully, we now appear to have newly elected MLAs that have expressed interest in reviving the bypass project. Hopefully, they are serious about their commitment and get the attention this project deserves. Best regards, John Martin. The next is from Daryl and Sharon Simpson. We are writing this letter to express our strong opposition to property PID 402666231 being rezoned from R2 to general commercial. Being an adjacent landowner, this would have a detrimental effect on us as well as our property. This neighborhood is a residential area and has been for many years, which adds to the appeal of it. Even though the property in question is not far from commercial properties, it is separated by a causeway. That separation defines a residential area which is between two causeways. Rezoning the subject property to commercial could cause criminal activity in the area, as commercial properties are often a target for crimes. As well, rezoning would affect the privacy of our property, and potential extra lighting and noise and traffic would have a very negative effect on our property. When a property is rezoned to commercial in a residential area, that sets precedents for other properties in that zone. As well, the owner's financial gain should not be used as a reason to rezone a property that surrounding landowners will suffer the detrimental effects for years to come. We are sure any residential property owner would not want an adjoining property rezoned to commercial in their residential neighborhood. We ask that you take our as well as our neighbors' concerns into consideration and not approve this rezoning. Daryl and Sharon Simpson.
Okay, so the next portion of the hearing is input from those wishing to speak for or against the letters of objection. So the first opportunity goes to the applicant, Dr. Louise Riveros Professional Corporation. Is the applicant present? It's not. I'll take it it's not you guys. Okay, so I guess the record would state that the applicant is not present. Now, so the next portion of input is the floor is open to individuals with wishing to speak for or against the written objections received by the City Council. Are there any persons present this evening wishing to address council? Okay, so I'm going to assume no. Okay, so then the third piece of this section is questions, if any, from members of council to the applicant, although the applicant is not present, and or to planning services staff. So effectively, are there any questions from members of council to planning services staff? Councillor King.
Thank you, Your Worship. On this application, how close is the nearest home to this property where this gentleman would like to build? What's the nearest house, residential area?
Yeah, I think Mr. Odette will answer the question.
Yeah, just 1 second here. I'll pull up my map. So there are two houses within about 100 feet. There is a house right across the street from the frontage of this property. And then there's another house along King George Highway to the east of the property. And then one as well immediately to the west, which is actually pretty close to the property line. So there'd be a couple properties potentially affected by any future development, for sure. Yeah.
You said earlier there's no water for that development?
No, there's no city water servicing in this portion of the city at all. No.
Not at all. Do we know exactly what's going to be built there?
Nope. So this is all. I guess it's a unique application. Usually, I'm in front of you with a direct development proposal to go along with a rezoning and plan amendment. In this case, the applicant has, within their rights, they've applied to rezone the property without any direct use in mind. My understanding is that they would like to change the zoning to assist in marketing, selling the property, but that was just mentioned to me by the applicant. So there is no use to consider at this point in time. We're kind of limited to the list of uses that was provided from the applicant. At a staff level, we did that when the application came in because I said, I don't want to be bringing forward this entire list of 30 or 40, however many commercial uses. Could you narrow down maybe what you would like to see or what people have been approaching them to build on the property? Part of it too is my understanding the owner has had inquiries for quite a while. This property's been for sale for a while. So they included some of the uses that potential buyers were bringing forward to them looking to build. So that's included in what they identified.
But once we find out the use, it's got to come back to council, right?
Nope. So it's as long as if someone wants to build any of the permitted uses that are listed in the conditions here, if council wishes to adopt that as is, those would be permitted moving forward. Those uses specifically. Yeah.
Thank you. Other members of council. I do have a couple of questions from the chair, so I don't see any lights. I'll give you. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Harris.
You're going to go, yeah. Thank you, Worship. First, I'll commend our Public Works and Engineering Department for not really. It's hard to comment on a development when we don't know what's going there, I guess, and they didn't. And obviously, right now, as council, it's a big difference from row houses that are just down the street that are being built at the other end of Pill Hill, we'll say, on the same side of the road, or car dealerships, like mentioned in a couple of letters. It's a huge difference, but it's on a turn there. I'm not sure how it would work. I mean, that's what our engineering department, Public Works, are for, to give us the details on that. So It is a tough one for sure. As for the property, that property's been for sale, I think, for 20 or 30 years that I remember. It's been for sale a long time, and there's been business people in this city that have owned that and recently sold it. And I'm not sure if they've ever asked to get it rezoned or that ever happened or not happened. It's something, Nick, you could get back to us on, or
Yeah, to
I
my
think
memory,
it did one time.
Yeah, to my memory, at least during the last municipal plan and zoning bylaw review, developers did have the opportunity, or just citizens had the opportunity to request that the zoning on their property be changed as part of that process. And as far as I remember, this property didn't come up at all. So.
And speaking of the municipal, when they did do the changes, I'll commend the councillors that were on it a few years ago. It was a long process, no doubt, and they put in the areas in the city where they wanted commercial, where they wanted to go residential. We already faced that with some row houses down off Percy Gully Drive. So it's for me, it's more thinking, but at the end of the day, I like to know what's going there for the people that live there, because I do understand the people that live there. You want to know what's being built beside you, so I commend the 2 letters that came in this evening for sure. Thank you, Nick.
Just a couple questions. Thank you, Councillor, from the chair, Mr. Odette. Just in terms of what will come forward to council for voting, will the motions be for as a starting point, because council can make amendments, but will the motions as a starting point be including the proposed uses as requested by the applicant, or the adjusted version of the list that is proposed by PRAC?
So it would be this adjusted list that was slightly modified as part of the staff recommendation and then further recommended by PRAC. So this list of uses is, it forms the condition that the PRAC has recommended. Okay. Essentially, yeah.
And then another question, Mr. Odette, could you remind me what is the definition of the residential mixed low density?
Sure. So that's not the zoning of this property, but immediately adjacent to it. That might have come up in the report just mentioning zones in the area. That zone allows for, I guess it's higher than R2, but lower than R3. So it allows single, 2, 3, 4 unit dwelling, along with a tiny home or a mini home. So it's meant to be, more in the outlying areas of the city that might not have full servicing. That's where we see that zone most often. Sort of Beaverbrook Road area, Gordon Road, which does have full servicing, but so no direct commercial uses permitted there. It does allow for a convenience store as a conditional use. It would have to be approved by PRAC. And then the typical secondary uses like home daycare, home business. So it's not a whole lot different than your typical R2, R1 zone. A few differences, but...
Okay, and then is there, we have an R3, right? Maybe It's just not listed here because there's none in that immediate area.
That's right, yep.
But R3 is 3 to 10 units, right?
I believe that's correct, yep.
Yeah, and what's the zoning of that, the recent development that was mentioned that's adjacent to Percy Kelly Drive? There are, I think there's at least 8 units in there now.
The row houses right off Percy Kelly?
Yeah.
That was rezoned to R4 by council, I believe, with some conditions attached to it.
I thought it was R3 as well, but maybe it is R. On this map, it's not really showing up. It's more than 8, yeah. So I guess then maybe my last question, Mr. Odette, is when these motions come to the table, and recognizing that the resistance from the neighbors has seemingly been towards commercial components, but that we do have an established precedent in the area of a higher than R1 or R2 zoning residential-wise, and a pretty significant housing need in the community, and a project just basically neighboring that has 10 or so units. Could we potentially amend the motion to change it to an R3 or an RML rather than adjusting the general commercial? Because if the options are general commercial or R1 or R2, but maybe the community's need is somewhere in between, is there an option to make a motion to go to R3 or something instead?
I'm not sure at this point if the actual zone and plan designation can be changed. I don't know, Mike, if you would know, but
My opinion would be no. The council's choices will be to allow the application as is, deny the application, or allow it with conditions. But to pick a zoning that nobody's asked for and hasn't been considered, I think is outside council's ability.
Thank you.
just to add to that, I mean, within the general commercial zone, there are a number of permitted residential uses, even beyond what's been recommended here. So potentially you could keep it as general commercial and then just list residential uses. I did note in the presentation, though, that without full city servicing, they would be limited to a 4-unit development on per property. So
maybe we could follow up with that on to the Director Rao, because I am the adjacent one. I remember, but I might be misremembering. They had asked for more than council ultimately allowed, but there does seem to be more than 4 units there, and they're not on city water. So could you speak to just refreshing us what happened there, Director Rao?
Sure. So that development, we were in negotiation with them about getting them on city water, and this is before council adopted a bylaw which states that any residential units above 4 units must be connected to city water and sewer. So they came in before the bylaw was passed. They were, I guess, probably one of the reasons that we passed the bylaw, you know. So they proceeded to develop that property. They kind of grandfathered in, I guess, before the bylaw was in. So now there is a bylaw in place, like I said. So any residential units above 4 units must be connected to city water and sewer.
Do you recall how many units are on that development?
Yeah, there's like 13 to 16 or something. I think he's.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's a lot more than 4. Yeah.
Thanks.
100%.
That's all the questions I have. I'll just ask if there are any others from other members of council. Sir, I regret to, I guess, advise that your opportunity to speak in the hearing has passed. And since there are no further members of council who are indicating they'd like to speak, I'll review the next steps in the process. So comments made tonight will be considered by council moving forward. Only those councillors who are in attendance at this public hearing shall be entitled to vote on third reading and enactment. Council will determine at a special council meeting on August 2nd, 2022, whether to give reading by title. I guess I'm just looking at the clerk because I understood we were not going to have a meeting that, or are we? We are. Okay. No, August 2nd?
Oh, sorry.
That's a special at the first of the month.
Oh, yeah.
prior
Oh, it's
the
going to be
regular.
1st and 3rd in August, right? Yes, okay, apologies. So it is August 2nd. I just wanted to confirm whether to give second reading by title, reading it in entirety, third reading by title and enactment to bylaw number 109-8 and bylaw number 110-16. There being no further business, this hearing is adjourned. There's